Tight end preview on this Friday morning. Welcome, everybody. It is August 4th, and we broke down quarterbacks yesterday. Today, a position that does not score quite as many points as quarterbacks. Adam Azer, handsome haircut Heath Cummings, Jamie Eisenberg, and Dave Richard. We're all here again to look at the tight end position. Is it the year of the tight end? Remember when we used to say that? Then we were like, you know what? We won't get fooled again. What do you think? Does anybody see a great year for tight ends in 2023?
Absolutely not.
No, nobody.
No.
Okay. Just had to ask. All right. So let's talk about this position and what you need to know. Can we sum it up with this? You need targets. You need a guy who's going to get a lot of targets. Top 5 tight ends almost always are top 2 on their team in targets, with a couple of exceptions last year, unfortunately. Heath, is that one of the first things you look for? Is that the first thing you look for when it comes to tight ends?
Yeah, I mean, it's probably one of the first things I look for in any pass catcher. So, like, that's definitely important. But I'm going to try a new strategy this year. I've been workshopping it for the past couple of weeks, trying to come up with a good name. And because I really want Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, or I just want to wait until the double-digit rounds. I think I'm going to call it great or late.
Oh, come on. Come on now. Great or late, yes. What was the joke originally? Because obviously that's an Azer expression, but I think Jamie.
I think the joke was that it was Jamie's idea.
Right. Great or late. So that's the other thing. So if you want an impact tight end, because there are not usually more than 5 or 6 a year, they're almost always first or second on their team in targets. As I mentioned, there have only been 3 tight ends in the last 7 seasons who have finished top 5 without being first or second on their team in targets. Robert Tonyan a few years ago, and 2 of them actually were last year. So that was weird. Kittle and Ingram. The other stat to know is that over the past 7 seasons, those same 7 seasons, 43% of the tight ends who finished top 5 were drafted in round 10 or later. In the last 5 seasons, it's 48%. And they've been drafted in round 10 or later, and they've finished top 5. So, Jamie, great or late? Great job by you coining that, or whoever it was. But do we follow? Because we spent a lot of time talking about tight ends 3 through 7. Hockenson, Pitts, Kittle, Goedert, Waller. Maybe we should be spending more time talking about, 10 and beyond. What do you think? Jamie?
Yeah.
No, I can hear you.
Dave, what do you think?
Dave, what do you think?
I think greater. Jamie knows now that he was supposed he knew it. I love great or late this year. I think if you're not getting one of Kelce, Andrews, Hockenson, Pitts is on the fringe. It depends on how you feel about him and Desmond Ridder. If you're not getting one of those guys, I think it's worth it to just wait. I like getting Evan Ingram late. I like getting Dalton Schultz late. If I'm going way late, I don't mind getting Laporta or Kincaid and just beginning the season with them as my streaming tight end.
Okay, Heath?
Yeah, I'm not going so far with the great or late that I'm now going to forget that rookie tight ends are almost always terrible. But I do like the idea of pairing like Higbee with Kincaid or Laporta. Because I think it's very likely that Tyler Higbee is going to be a target monster again. The problem is that he doesn't ever do anything with those targets except for catch passes. Sometimes they bounce off of his big hands. So I do think like one high floor late guy and then one of Laporta or Kincaid as the high ceiling late guy. Another guy that would fit with Higbee in that group would be Gerald Everett. We've seen what the Cooper Rush offense has done for tight ends. I mean, he turned Dalton Schultz.
Cooper Kupp.
Kellen Moore.
Cooper Rush.
Let's not retire Cooper Rush this fast. Come on.
Is Cooper Rush still an active player?
I think he is.
Okay. Anyway, I think Gerald Everett will be in that Higbee group as well of guys that you can probably count on for, 9 fantasy points per game. The great thing about tight end, it's actually terrible, but anybody could be a streamer because it takes 9 fantasy points per game to be a starter.
I think it takes a little more than that, but if you're streaming and you get 9 points a game, you're pretty happy. And that's what I would say about the rookies. I'm not making a season-long commitment to any tight end I'm drafting past round 9. But
well, wait, hold on.
Laporta's my guy to begin the year if I'm taking a tight end very, very late.
I just need to. I think ADP. There's a couple of guys, maybe 3, that you would make a season-long commitment to that are being drafted in either late round 9 or round 10 or round 11, according to Fantasy Football Calculator average draft position, and they are Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, and Dalton Schultz. So if you can get one of them in round 10 and pair them with Dalton Kincaid or Greg Dulcich or something like that, maybe that's not so bad. But I think the more interesting discussion is, Dave and I just did this exercise, and I don't have it written down, but we looked at the tight ends drafted between rounds 4 through 7 the last 3 years, and it's a lot more misses than hits. So is that what's going to happen? I think what's interesting, Jamie, about the tight ends 4 through 7. Hi, Jamie. Nope, can't hear him. What the hell? The microphone's still not working. Heath, what's interesting about rounds 4 through 7 is that it's a lot of guys who are really proven. Hockenson's pretty proven. It's not like some of the names we've seen in this range in previous years have been Logan Thomas. Who else, Dave? I can't even remember. Some guys that's like, really? We drafted them that optimistically? But it's Hockenson. It's Pitts is not that proven, but it's Kittle, it's Goedert, it's Waller. They're better on paper than what we've seen in the past in this range, but this has been a bad range.
It has been a bad range, and I'm not generally drafting from this group, so I think it might be a bad range again. Like if they go in round 7, I'd be happy with them, but I'm not taking these guys in round 5 or 6, which it seems like a lot of people are. And while you can say they're proven, it's also true that Kittle and Waller are old, or Waller for sure, have injury concerns, have serious quarterback concerns. So I don't feel like what George Kittle and Darren Waller have done in the past makes me feel more certain that they're going to deliver on a round 5 or 6 price tag this year. Do you, Jamie?
No, come on, Jamie, we can't hear him. I don't know what's going on. Jamie, I can't speak for Jamie, unfortunately. All right, we'll get back into those guys in a little bit. So those are just some stats to know. Here's another thing to know. The Fantasy Football Today Open, the FFT Open, sold out faster than Taylor Swift. We had 88 spots. They're all gone. And I want to thank everybody for paying $250 each. That's $22,000 that we raised for St. Jude last night. That is awesome. And that will get going. We'll get the drafts going. If you're in it, thank you very much for your participation. Please leave us a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. We've had some great reviews, some great feedback, and we really appreciate that. That's one way to help our show grow. People are going to search for podcasts. They're going to look at reviews, tell them why you like the show. If you ask a question as well, good chance it'll be read on a mailbag. Although I got to say, we're getting so many reviews right now. I know I'm not going to be able to get to all of them, but a decent percentage of those will be read. Speaking of which, mailbag coming up this afternoon. Me and Dan Schneier are going to be doing that. I'm not sure if anybody else is going to hop on that. It's going to air on Saturday, but since we don't have a ton of time during the week to read emails and Apple Podcast questions and YouTube comments, we'll try to throw in these Saturday mailbags for you just to get some questions answered. And the last thing is, please hit the like button on YouTube and subscribe on YouTube at youtube.com/fantasyfootballtoday. We need those subscriptions. We want to get up to 100,000 subscribers. I think we're somewhere around 75 or something like that. So, anyway.
Tell your friends, have them subscribe.
Jamie, are we trying this again? Nope. All right. Yep. We'll, very strange. We'll see what happens there. Okay.
It's a great bit for the show today, though.
We teased it, but let's do it again here. What's your overall tight end strategy in 2023, Dave?
It's great or late.
Heath?
Yeah, it's a little more complicated than that. It's pretty much Kelce in round 1, Andrews in round 3, Hockenson or Pitts in round 5, or Njoku or Freiermuth in round 8.
Okay. So Waller, Goedert, Kittle is not for you.
If they were going back in the round 8 range, they would be, but I don't have a big difference And in fact, I have both Njoku and Freiermuth. I have Njoku ahead of both of them, and Freiermuth ahead of Waller. So, like when those guys go earlier, there's just no chance. If I miss out on all those guys, which I have before, then it's one of the upside guys and one of the safe guys.
Give me your just to put that out there again, because I think that's a very good guide. Give me the rounds again. Kelce in round 1, Andrews in round 2. Go on.
Kelce in round 1, Andrews in round 3, Hockenson or Pitts in round 5, Njoku or Freiermuth in round 8. If not, then I'll wait till double digits rounds and probably take 2, and Higbee or Everett will be one of them.
Dave, give me a little bit more nuance to great or late.
I mean, I think everybody listening kind of understands it. You don't want to go crazy reaching for a tight end. Although I think that might not apply to Kelce. There's just going to be some fantasy managers out there that are going to look at Kelce as such a big difference maker that they're willing to take him first overall. In a tight end premium, makes all the sense in the world. Full PPR doesn't make much sense because even in his best years, he never scored as many points as the top wide receivers, as the top running backs. I think he's a middle of round 1 type of pick if you want to have that tight end advantage. And we can get a little bit more into Kelce in a second. Andrews, I would not reach for the top 15 pick, again, unless it's tight end premium. I like him around the 2-3 turn. I pretty much feel the same way Heath does about where you get Hockenson and Pitts. They're in that round 4-5 range. If I were to draft one of Goedert, Waller, Kittle, it would be like 7-8. I would want to see them slip a little bit where I'd feel like, okay, now I can, the opportunity cost isn't as high. Because there are players at other positions I would much rather have than any of those 3 tight ends in rounds 5 and 6. And then after that, it's just you're hoping for a tight end that can finish first or second on his team in targets, average 6+ targets per game, be a factor in the red zone. That profile seems to set up nicely for, I don't know about Evan Ingram, but certainly for Dalton Schultz in Houston until we see a wide receiver really break out, or 2 wide receivers break out. That would keep Dalton Schultz from getting to that type of target threshold.
I know you said be a factor in the red zone or the end zone, wherever you said. This is just a weird stat that I thought of bringing up here. Over the last 2 seasons with Jalen Hurts, in the Jalen Hurts era, but including the Gardner Minshew games, Dallas Goedert has 4 end zone targets in the last 2 seasons. That is 158 in the NFL. He has run 37 routes from inside the 10-yard line, or the 10-yard, including the 10-yard line, in those 2 seasons. Devontae Smith, by comparison, 58 routes. They just don't use Goedert near the end zone, in routes very often.
Yep.
So it's interesting. But if that ever changes, Goedert is basically the most efficient tight end in fantasy. He's basically George Kittle. His explosive play rate is number 1 among tight ends 2 straight seasons. I think he's number 1 in yards per target 2 straight seasons. He just never catches touchdowns. But if that changes, man, look out. Goedert could be great. I think we can make the case for Waller being, Jamie would make it if he were here. But are you on the phone, Heath?
No.
What is happening? Are you talking to Jamie?
No.
Okay. So anyway, it's really interesting. But I think what you're hearing from Dave and Heath is round 8, if you can get Kittle, Goedert, Waller for Heath. Dave maybe more in round 7. And I think what Jamie said about it was, and that was Jamie's thoughts on the matter. But am I wrong, Dave? I thought you were.
I don't think you're wrong. I think round 7 is probably the earliest I would consider those guys. Okay. And my order on them in PPR is Waller, Kittle, Goedert. It's the touchdowns that Kittle can get. I think he's got more touchdown upside than Goedert has. You kind of outlined what the problem was for Goedert. He was also 10th among tight ends in targets per game last year.
What's your order of that group, Heath? Tight ends, what is it, 5, 6, 7?
Goedert, Njoku, Kittle, Freiermuth.
And Waller is what?
9.
Why are you so low on him?
I don't know if you know this, but I think he's missed 14 games over the last 2 seasons. He's on the wrong side of 30, and he's playing with a quarterback who hasn't thrown more than 16 touchdown passes since his rookie year.
The only reason why I've got a little bit more optimism in Waller is because it sounds like Daniel Jones has been crushing it in camp, and Waller's healthy now. And if you go back and you look at his last 4 games from last season, he moves around pretty well. I'm not the biggest Waller fan at his ADP by any measure. Jamie will hold that title. Jamie will get a lot of Waller. He actually got Waller in our salary cap mock yesterday. But even I have to say that he's probably got a great shot to lead the Giants in targets per game. And he's not moving like a typical 30-year-old.
So I think that's interesting.
Points in his favor.
Because I'm sure there have been guys I've missed because of this. But when a guy's been in the NFL for 4 years like Jones or 8 years like Waller, or however long, I don't know. I mean, how they look in shorts doesn't generally make me think doesn't really change my opinion of them.
Yeah. Well, I think the question is, how good was Waller when he was healthy last year?
He was good. He averaged over 11 PPR points per game.
Right.
But he was playing with a better passer.
Well, last year, Derek Carr really did not have a good season. And he was playing with a better passer than what Daniel Jones has been, but he also was playing with Devontae Adams. And that was a big problem for Darren Waller because he wasn't being targeted nearly like what we saw in previous years. So not only is he going to be first or second on the team in targets, I'd be shocked if he weren't first on the targets, at least first in targets, at least per game. Injuries are a concern. But I have a hard time, Heath, putting Waller behind Njoku and Ingram when they have never even sniffed the air that Darren Waller has lived in fantasy. And I don't think they have.
Yeah, I don't have him behind Ingram.
Oh, I'm sorry. You have him behind Waller.
But you've got Njoku ahead of him.
And Freiermuth, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, all right.
Yeah, I can't do that. As much as I don't love Waller, I'm looking to draft him at a value. Happily take him ahead of those guys.
And I think another question for Waller, I do think he'll be first. I haven't projected first in targets, but I don't have anybody projected for 100 targets in that offense. I think it's going to be really interesting to see if they actually do choose to throw the ball a lot more, or if they do the thing that was much better for them last year, which is have Daniel Jones run or give it to Saquon Barkley.
So this is a Daniel Jones stat, but it is relevant as heck for Darren Waller. So the Giants, I think, are going to be worse this year. They have a much harder schedule.
Yes.
In their wins last year, Daniel Jones threw 25 passes per game. In their losses, he threw 36 passes per game. Late in the year, they went to a more 3 wide receiver set. I think they absolutely intend to throw the ball more this year. I don't think they're going to be a 28 pass attempt per game kind of team. And I do think that's very relevant for Darren Waller, but I think we should come back to that a little bit later when we look at ADP, because we have more questions to answer, more general questions to answer, and bills to pay. We got a commercial break coming up right now. We'll talk about how early Travis Kelce should go. You heard Dave talk about mid-round first. Let's get an actual number of where we're taking Kelce right after this. All right, Travis Kelce's had kind of an interesting career his last 6 seasons, one of them with Alex Smith, 5 with Mahomes. He's been the number 1 tight end in 5 of them. There's really no doubting that. Should he be a first-round pick? Should he be a top 10 pick? I would say that if you just look at points per game in the even-numbered years, 2018, 20, and 22, absolutely. He's been 18.5 or more fantasy points per game. In the odd-number years, 2017, 19, and 21, no, he's been about 15.5 to 16.5 points per game. So those kind of coincided with better passing seasons for the Chiefs offense, but it's a little risky. If you get a guy who's scoring 16.5 points per game, he might be the number 1 tight end. He should not be a top 10 pick. If you get 18.5 points per game from a tight end, okay, then I can see it. So go ahead, Heath.
What if tight ends like it was last year, and I referenced 9 fantasy points per game, and Dave's right. Most years that has not been good enough to be a starting tight end. Last year, Dalton Schultz was tight end 9 at 9.5 PPR fantasy points per game. 9. So I do kind of disagree. I have Kelce at 7 in PPR. I don't have him in the first round in non-PPR. But I do think 16.5 PPR fantasy points per game maybe doesn't feel like a first round pick. But if it's like an 80% increase on the 9th best tight end in the league, then I think it is.
Okay. So they're comparing him with guys who are probably going to score around 20 points per game. So Dave, all right, First of all, I think he's going to be more like 18 or more. So I feel like he could do what he did last year. He had Tyreek Hill for most of those seasons. 1 year without Tyreek Hill, he was incredible. But Dave, how early? What did you say, Heath? You have him 7th?
7th in full PPR.
And Dave?
I've got him top 10, 9th overall.
Jamie? No, he can't talk. He's talking. Can't hear us? Oh my gosh. Disaster.
He's on his laptop now.
Yeah.
Yep.
All
He's
right.
on his laptop. He's
You
got
hang out
headphones.
there and try to figure it out, Jamie.
I think he's messing with us. I think he can hear us. Try saying a word, Jamie.
I don't think he can hear us.
Say boom.
All right.
He's not even talking.
How
Lip
important
seal.
is it? How important is it to have a top 7 tight end, which we've already discussed? But if you could sum it up in 30 seconds, how important is it to have a top 7 tight end?
Can we change that number?
Top 5?
I mean, I think you'll have an edge over the majority of your league, but it's more about having a top 2 tight end.
Yeah.
Yeah. How important to have a top 2 tight end?
Very, 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 very important. But I made reference to like the 9.5 fantasy points per game that was tight end 9 last year. Tight end 7 was 10.3. It was not important at all. It was basically the same as streaming the position. So I don't think having a top 7 tight end is that important at all.
Okay. What do you think, Jamie?
Can you hear me?
Yes!
Oh, yes.
Great or late?
Late or late? Feel like that's me. Just late.
All right.
So we're talking kickers, right?
Yeah. Kickers. How important to have a top 2 kicker? So I guess you know what? We spent a lot of time on where should Kelce go? Where should Mark Andrews go, Jamie Eisenberg?
Early round 3. Early to mid round 3.
Give me some names. How about that tier of Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Chris Olave?
Right there, and I think with the quarterbacks also for me, so once you get past the swing, depending on if you're going to take, Mahomes, Allen, or Hurts, I think, Andrews belongs in that group of receivers. I would take Devontae Smith over him. You can certainly talk about whether it's, T. Higgins, Chris Olave, or Mark Andrews. I could see it go any which way depending on how your first 2 picks go. So, but I think the beginning part of round 3 is about the right spot to start to consider him. And then if he falls to the middle to the end of round 3, I think you're getting a pretty good steal.
Yeah, Joe Mixon, Ramondre Stevenson, or Mark Andrews, guys?
Stevenson for me, then Andrews.
Mixon, Andrews, Stevenson for me.
Stevenson, Mixon, Andrews.
Top 3 quarterbacks or Andrews?
All 3 QBs.
Okay.
I would take the quarterbacks over him also.
All right. Should you draft 2 tight ends? Heath, you've kind of been saying if you miss out on the top 2 or the top 5 or what? Top 4?
I mean, it obviously depends on the depth of your league. In a standard draft that's on CBS where it's 13 picks that are not kickers or defenses, I'd really rather not. But if I don't take a tight end that's in the top 10, then I will probably take 2. Maybe.
You guys have been doing a lot of drafts. Which tight end or tight ends do you find yourself drafting the most?
I mean, Waller's my favorite of the third group, wherever you want to put Andrews. But post Andrews, Waller's my favorite.
Okay. And we had a little bit of crapping on Darren Waller earlier. Not from me. I would never do that.
Well, that would be stupid.
Go ahead. All right. Go ahead. You make your case because Heath doesn't like the injuries, doesn't like the quarterback, doesn't like the age. And why are you so pro Waller?
I mean, look, those are all valid excuses. I think he's going to have a bounce back season, if he's healthy, which is clearly something that nobody can predict. If he's healthy, he's going to lead the team in targets. He's going to have, I think, the ability to show that he's still on that level. I don't downgrade Daniel Jones as a quarterback for him comparatively to, let's say, who he's been playing with Derek Carr. I think it is a downgrade, but not something that I'm going to run away from. I love the system. I love the coach. I think Brian Daboll is going to feature Darren Waller to a level that, he was at 2 years ago. And so I think he's got a chance to be in the conversation to be the number 2 tight end this year.
Okay. Let's do sleepers, breakouts, and oh, actually, no. I'm sorry, Heath and Dave. I don't think you answered that question. Dave, who do you find yourself drafting the most?
You're
Heath,
asking me?
Yeah. Okay. There you go. Heath. Dave. Gotcha.
I find myself getting a lot of Evan Ingram, Dalton Schultz, Laporta. So I guess I'm in the late camp.
Okay. Heath.
I don't think like I gave those guys and where I'm drafting them, but I don't think this year there's been one guy, and other than Kelce or Andrews, I'm pretty okay with that. I don't think I want to be too heavily invested in any tight end not named Travis Kelce or Mark Andrews, because they could all stink.
How much do you guys want Kyle Pitts, generally speaking?
Round 5 went.
Yep.
100%. Yep.
Right. Let me ask you a weird question here. I understand you have guys like Njoku, Ingram, Freiermuth, who's going into his 3rd year, ranked ahead of guys like Dulcich or Trey McBride or something like that. But is there any argument that you should just skip those guys who, at best, what are we talking, 850 yards or something like that? You know, I'm not saying I believe this, but the argument, we know who they are, especially in Njoku and Ingram. Maybe we should just skip them and just take 2 shots on young tight ends who haven't done it yet, because this is a position. Greg Dulcich, okay, he averaged 41.1 yards per game last year as a rookie. That is more than Rob Gronkowski, George Kittle, and Mark Andrews averaged as rookies. This is a position where you see guys make huge leaps in their 2nd season. And then you've got Kincaid coming into a good situation. You've got Laporta coming into a good situation. Maybe we should just skip the guys that we know at best they're going to be fine and take 2 shots on players who might be on our waiver wire in a few weeks, but hey, they might be the surprise tight ends of 2023.
What's the argument for combining those philosophies? Take 2 shots on tight ends. If one of them happens to be Evan Ingram or David Njoku, throw Freiermuth in there. What's the problem? You're just bettering your chances of having a tight end that can make a difference for your fantasy team.
I guess I'd say that even though Evan Ingram was the number 5 tight end in fantasy last year, he didn't really make that much of a difference for your fantasy team. He just wasn't consistently good. So you're taking one of those guys, and maybe they don't really have any true upside, that they're just sort of fine. And you should actually just spend 2 picks on guys with huge upside, if that exists.
And the guys that have the huge upside have it because they're younger or because they haven't had a tight end 5 season yet?
Yes, that's honestly how I know that sounds counterintuitive. And again, I'm not saying I believe this, but when you look at the guys who make huge jumps, I mean, I can't really see it from Evan Ingram.
I think it's more of a philosophy situation because of where you're picking those guys, right? So who are the guys you're saying to avoid? Ingram,
okay,
Njoku,
I don't want to be
not avoid, but who are the ones you're thinking that are sort of their ceilings capped a little bit?
I would say Freiermuth, Ingram, and
why Freiermuth?
Yeah, I would take him out of that
because they want to be a run-heavy team. I think they showed that last year, and we just had a report 2 days ago. They've got Johnson, they've got Pickens, and they've got Kenny Pickett. How good could Pat Freiermuth be? That'd be my argument against his ceiling.
Well, I mean, he did score 7 touchdowns as a rookie, and if that number bounces back based on some of the other things that they're going to do with him, I think he's got a chance to take that next step. But sure, if you want to put him in this category, the thing I would say to that is that's the right approach, is to let somebody else take those guys if you don't believe in them, and to take those swings later. Because what are you doing with those picks? Are you taking a shot on a lottery ticket running back, on a receiver that can take a step forward, as opposed to, okay, I'm just going to get tight end 8 and hope that that's the best case scenario, right? So I get it. Yeah, that's fine.
But I don't subscribe to that theory. I just want to. I think Dave's take one of them and one of the guys later is a better way to do it. But
I think also it's it's not necessarily just the younger guys. I think it's who can you target that has the chance to take that step forward. So is it going to be a volume-based thing, like maybe a Tyler Higbee, who has a chance to, whether you think he's good or not, he's going to be involved. Is it going to be somebody that might be very touchdown dependent, like we saw last year, like Juwan Johnson, who may get a quarterback now that leans on his tight ends, and you're hoping for that type of situation? Is it going to be Gerald Everett, who's getting a huge offense coordinator boost and has shown the ability to feature his tight end And that's the type of scenario you're buying into. So I think it's not necessarily just I'm looking at Dalton Kincaid because we can see the path to success, or Sam Laporta because you see the path to success, but they are unproven. Maybe you're also taking a shot on somebody that situation or coach or whatever quarterback, might favor that player. And that's the type of situation, right? Like I know Heath, for example, you like Irv Smith a lot, right? Because of his maybe his situation, but he hasn't done it yet. So that's a guy that you could say, okay, I'm not just going because he's in that range of maybe breakout like a McBride or a Dulcich. You're looking at the scenario overall for him.
Okay. All right. Let's do sleepers, breakouts, and busts. How about that? Heath, who's your favorite sleeper tight end? We'll go Heath, Dave, Jamie.
I should have had. You said ADP, Freiermuth and Njoku are both outside of round 10, right?
I think Freiermuth is at the round 9-10 turn, and Njoku's in round 10.
So I will say David Njoku. And it's kind of weird to call him a sleeper because I think like if he's as good as he was last year in round 10, that is a sleeper. He'll be a tight end 6, tight end 7. He was basically the same as Evan Ingram last year. I do think they're going to throw a lot more. I don't necessarily believe that the tight end targets are going to disappear because they've been there in Kevin Stefanski's system. And so I expect he's going to have somewhere in that 80 to 95 target range. And if Deshaun Watson becomes Deshaun Watson again, actually I haven't projected for 103, so a little higher than that, then those targets could be worth a lot more.
Dave, your favorite sleeper tight end?
Dalton Schultz. His ADP on NFC over their last 17 drafts, his last few days, is 134th. I think he's going to return pretty good value on that. I like the opportunity that he's got to continue being a primary target, especially with a rookie quarterback in an offense. This is the 49ers West Coast system. They utilize tight ends quite a bit out there. And he's been a red zone threat for years. He was in Dallas a couple of years ago. He had a ton of touchdowns. He could revert to that. We talked about that with Freiermuth. Schultz is in the exact same camp.
Do you also feel like he could have been included in that not super high ceiling conversation, Dalton Schultz?
Yes.
Okay.
But I view him as a little bit safer. Doesn't have the ceiling of like Pitts or Hockenson or even Waller. But I think he could be a safe PPR tight end.
Jamie, your favorite sleeper tight end?
I mean, just based on ADP, I'll take Kincaid. The opportunity to be the big slot receiver and play a big role with Josh Allen for a team that didn't really add a lot to its receiving core. I like the setup for him. So, great opportunity to take somebody of his potential with a late round pick.
Man, I to go a little bit deeper here, that Arizona tight end room is so interesting. Zach Ertz in the first 6 games of the season without Hopkins, he was on pace for 99 catches and 144 targets. He was a must-start guy. McBride finished the season pretty strong, played 76% or more of the snaps in each of his last 8 games, played 83% or more in each of his last 4 games. Trey McBride is going into his second year. He had 90 catches and 1,100 yards as a senior in 2021. Anybody looking at that Arizona tight end room? You got Ertz,
Yes.
33 years old, and
Absolutely.
coming off a torn ACL.
He was originally going to be who I was going to say as a sleeper.
McBride,
But I just love the ADP for Schultz, and Schultz will get drafted more often. McBride is like one of 7 tight ends that we've barely talked about so far who might be on the waiver wire to begin the year and then end up being a fantasy starter by the midseason.
All right, let's do breakouts. Go Dave, Jamie, Heath. Dave, who's your favorite breakout tight end?
Kyle Pitts is the easy answer, just because we've seen him have a 1,000-yard season. Last year, he hurt his knee, so he couldn't quite get to that mark, but he was getting open like crazy. Hopefully, Desmond Ridder can find him a lot more often than Marcus Mariota could. I expect him to be the number 1 target in the Falcons offense.
Jamie.
I'll say Dulcich. I think there's an opportunity here for, especially now Tim Patrick's out, so we'll see if that means more for Marvin Mims or, whatever they're going to do with the receiving core there behind the top 2 guys of Judy and Sutton. But, showed flashes last year. So there's obviously a rapport already established with Russell Wilson. Sean Payton, he's gotten some good moments out of his tight ends clearly in his career at New Orleans. And again, the profile that you look for, good college, numbers, showed some flashes in the rookie season, second-year guy. So, easy guy you could put in the sleeper category as well. But I think just based on the opportunity to take next step, he's a guy that I like a lot.
Heath, favorite breakout?
I'll take the Moose. I do not believe that after 2 seasons as a tight end, we've seen what the cap is on his upside. He had 14 more targets than George Pickens last year, despite the fact that Pickens played one more game. I think the expectation should be that he and Pickens are right there in terms of total targets. If he gets the number of targets he saw last year, I think it was 98 in 16 games, and has the touchdown rate that he did his rookie year, he's going to be a top 5 tight end. He might be a top 3 tight end.
How many touchdowns did he have last year?
2.
Mark Andrews, Evan Ingram, and Pat Freiermuth were tied with 7 games with 11 plus PPR points last year. It's like tied for 4th among all tight ends. And Freiermuth was 6th in targets per game last year. There's a case to be made that all he needs is just a few more touchdowns. I think you've been saying this, Heath. Right. Maybe he can be that guy that doesn't finish second on the team in targets and still finishes as a quality fantasy tight end. And what if he does finish second on the team in targets?
There was a report this offseason that the draft pick of Darnell Washington was to allow Freiermuth to play that big slot role. And that's something that could really benefit him because, he did well in those opportunities last season. So I wouldn't be surprised if he's second on the team in targets beyond Deontay Johnson.
I would just say, like, it does seem like I get a lot of pushback on, well, George Pickens and Deontay Johnson are there.
Right.
And I just don't like George Pickens has not yet shown himself to be the type of wide receiver who would earn a lot of targets. He makes incredible plays. He's a fantastic video game player, but you don't throw the ball 120 times on a 9 route.
Yeah.
Oh, you don't know our bet, Heath. Dave and I have a bet. Who's going to be the leader in targets for the Steelers? Deontay Johnson or George Pickens?
Heath, you want to get in on it and take Freiermuth?
No, I would like to. I'll do the bet of who's going to be second because nobody's coming within 50 of Deontay Johnson unless he gets hurt.
I agree.
Well, look, I shouldn't have put Freiermuth in that conversation.
But you did.
I did. But I was really saying it hypothetically. But if really the 3 I should have used were Njoku, Ingram, and Schultz. Freiermuth is at a different point in his career, so I was unfair to him. All right, and let's do busts here, and we'll go Heath, Jamie, Dave. Heath, who's the biggest bust candidate at tight end?
You don't let me go first on anything.
I think Jamie should go first.
I want to go first.
You spoke so much early in the show, Jamie. I was trying to give you. Who's the biggest bust, Jamie?
Well, I want the easy one, which is George Kittle. As the 4th tight end going in round 5 still.
Late round 5.
Yeah, and round 5. Look, he was great with Brock Purdy whenever Deebo Samuel wasn't there. Scored 6 touchdowns in those 5 games that Deebo Samuel missed, and never scored that many touchdowns before in his life. But it's hard to expect that same type of production because we saw the targets really not disappear, but crater when Deebo came back, and so you have. Purdy's going to lean on him to a degree that I think his points per game will be good, but there's going to be a lot of games where he's going to, I think, have you frustrated. And so to see him go ahead of, for me, Waller, I would take a chance on Pitts first. I would take Goedert ahead of him as well. I think Kittle belongs as the 7th tight end. And if you're saying that the ADP for Goedert, what I'm looking at is 72nd overall. That's where Kittle should live.
I agree. He was below 6.7 targets per game for the first time since his rookie year last year. He was significantly below that. And if the 49ers offense wants to be more explosive, they want to take advantage of both Ayuk and Deebo, then I think Kittle's the one who pays the price for that. Plus McCaffrey's there. That's really when his targets started to dip initially, was when CMC went to San Francisco. So I have a hard time drafting Kittle anywhere close to 4th tight end off the board. I won't do it.
The only thing I would push back on, I think he's still pretty explosive. I don't think that's part
not
of the game.
Like the other guys.
He's still a mismatch nightmare for anybody in the middle of the field, and his explosiveness has not changed.
Yeah, look, Kittle, there's a lot to not like.
Compared to Ayuk and Deebo?
In terms of what they are relative to their positions, his explosiveness
That's not what I was saying. Right. But yes, I agree with you on that.
There's a lot not to like about Kittle. It really is. But he has also been a top 3 tight end per game 5 straight seasons. It's a little bit hard to walk away from.
Yep.
Yeah, I wish he were going more in the, your 7th and not 4th. So who's going next? Heath, you're next.
I'm going to stick with Darren Waller. I do think like there's obviously upside if he's a good value, but he's turns 31 years old in September. He has missed 14 games over the last 2 seasons. He's a player or a pass catcher over 30, changing teams. He's going to a team with a quarterback who has really never produced an elite fantasy pass catcher and hasn't, is it 15 passing touchdowns? He hasn't thrown more than 15 passing touchdowns in the last 3 seasons. Might be 17. But I'm afraid that this remains a run heavy offense. And that even though he leads the team in targets, it's like 90, 95 targets.
Dave, biggest bust tight end for you?
I don't have a problem where Njoku's going in ADP, but there are tight ends going after him that I'd rather have on my team. He averaged 10.1 PPR points per game last year. That felt like a breakout. That's the number that's like an acceptable range for a top 12 type of fantasy tight end. He averaged a full point less in the 5 games with Deshaun Watson. He doesn't have that same type of upside as Freiermuth, as Evan Ingram, as Darren Waller, and potentially in full PPR as Dalton Schultz. I've got to take him like round 11 or later if I'm going with Njoku. He's one of those tight ends that I'm looking at as a disposable tight end. If he's not kicking it in the first 3 weeks, I'm finding somebody off the waiver wire.
Boy, I'm really
Can I get one
surprised
more?
that nobody said Hockenson as a bust. Because
I don't think he'll bust.
He's the 3rd tight end off the board. And I just don't think, I don't know if you guys agree with this. I don't think you should draft Hockenson as the 3rd tight end instead of waiting like 3 more rounds and getting the 7th tight end or something like that. Just don't think he makes enough of a difference at the position. I'm not taking the first guy in that group of 5, and it seems to almost always be Hockenson. And he's just such an ordinary, such an ordinary player. Hasn't really done much in the NFL. But anyway, Jamie, what were you going to say?
No, the ADP is too high, and I think it's a matter of, again, how far does he slip where you want to buy into him. So I get that. But for me, another one is Ingram. I just think last year, like you said, Adam, he had some splash games at the end of the season, but now you're bringing in Ridley. I think that's going to hurt him. I think we're going to see, the career arc of Evan Ingram was great last season in a contract year. Not significant enough competition for targets, and now that's changing.
Yeah, the counter is yes, targets are going to be harder to come by because of Ridley, but we're hoping for a big jump from Trevor Lawrence that could compensate for that, because Lawrence, they only threw for 42 yards.
But it's not like Zay Jones is going away.
No, and it wasn't even that good of a year for Ingram. 73 catches is good.
Right.
766 yards, 4 touchdowns in 17 games. Like, okay, you're the man.
Somehow he finished 5th in total points among tight ends, 7th in PPR points per game, 9th in targets per game.
Yeah. I know how. It's because everybody else was awful.
Right, exactly.
All right. Well, we're going to take a break here and come back and go through average draft position and see what we like and what we don't like. We'll be right back on Fantasy Football Today. Tight end ADP, according to NFC, since July 21st. So I think that's about 90 drafts. Travis Kelce is going 6th overall, which is a little bit higher than where Dave and Heath had him. I think 7th and 8th. Jamie, where do you have Kelce?
I have Kelce right in that same range.
Okay. You guys going Cup or Kelce?
Kelce now.
Cup.
Bijan or Kelce?
Bijan.
Kelce.
Bijan.
All right.
Bijan, Cup, Kelce.
We already did the Mark Andrews or a little bit earlier. Most of you like the quarterbacks that are in the top 3 quarterbacks. Devontae Smith, T. Higgins, Chris Olave. He's right in that group. A little bit of disagreement on Ramondre Stevenson and Joe Mixon versus Mark Andrews. But, he's going 32nd overall. And he's only had 1 great year. I believe in him because I think you do have to sort of parse the data and say, well, with Lamar Jackson, before Mark Andrews' injury last year, he was absolutely performing like at worst a 2nd-round pick. And then Lamar Jackson got hurt, and they had the worst passing offense in the world. But look at the stat. You just go to his stats page. He's only had 1 great season. Does anybody have concerns about that with Andrews?
Get him, Heath.
No. I don't feel that way. I'm just saying that is a fact. He's only had 1.
The creator of the Azer stat doesn't get to come in with that as a fact.
It is a fact.
It doesn't work that way. Give us some Azer stats. And he's had more like I think the thing is like if Andrews busts, he's TJ Hockenson who's going like 10 picks later. And if he hits, we were talking about Andrews in the early second round last year.
Right.
So taking him in round 3, if those are the two ranges, that makes a lot of sense to me.
No, that's fine. I just pointing out he's had one season in his career with more than 852 yards. So there's that.
He's had at least 11.6 PPR points per game each of the last 4 years.
That's not. I'm not taking 11.6 in the third round.
But he's only good with Tyler Huntley.
No, he was good. I think he's going to have a much better year than 850 yards. They're going to throw the ball a lot more. He was killing it before his injury and then Lamar Jackson's injury.
Well, that's the thing. He had 847 yards last year in 14 and a half games. Like he's only had one season with more than 850 yards is technically true, but 847 when his quarterback played half the year.
You don't have to argue with me. I'm just saying in terms of his, I am with you. We
do. This is the tight end preview and you're throwing things out here and saying that is a fact.
I'm not arguing with me. You're taking it out of me. Argue with stats. Just yell at the Pro Football Reference.
Can I give a stat?
Sure.
In 9 games that he started and finished with Lamar Jackson last year, he averaged 15.4 PPR points per game. I don't think it'll be that high. Okay, let's face facts. Yes, the Ravens offense is changing. They'll throw a little bit more, but Odell's there, Zay's there. Rashad Bateman's going to be healthy enough to play week 1. Questions about the run game. But if they're throwing considerably more, I don't know if that target share is going to dip that much. I think Andrews is going to be pretty good. I think he's worth a third-round pick.
Who's doing our projections that Hockenson is over Andrews? Is it Thomas?
It's Sportsline. Look, Hockenson, let's talk more about Hockenson. We seem to have sort of skipped over him a little bit. He's the third tight end off the board. He's a round 4 pick. Is anybody comfortable with Hockenson in round 4 of a 12-team league?
Nope.
No.
Okay, he had 129 targets. Heath, yeah, you're comfortable with that?
No, late round 4, but I don't ever take him there because there's always somebody I have like we talked about. Like we get to the end of round 3 and my 33 through 36 go round 3 through 5 for me. But late round 4, if everybody I liked ahead of him had already gone, yeah.
Okay, so total target hog. Not hog because Jefferson there, but 129 targets in 17 games with 2 teams last year. And his 17-game pace with Minnesota was 146 targets. You already heard me say I'm not drafting Hockenson as tight end 3 in round 4, but I can just tell you right now a great case for him. Why should we throw out the postseason game? He had a great game in the playoffs, 10 catches for 129 yards against the Giants. If you take that game and you include that and give him a 17-game pace with the Vikings, it's 117 catches, 1,074 yards, and 5 touchdowns on 9 targets per game on 163 targets, 15 fantasy points per game. Would have been the number 2 tight end per game. So
does he get to play the Giants every time?
Yeah, that's the problem. He killed the Giants twice. He killed the Seahawks once. He had a lot of quiet games.
I guess we're done with that as a fact. We're gonna Azer stat everybody else. We're not doing that as a fact for TJ Hockenson.
All I said was Mark Andrews only had one great season, and that is true. I don't dislike him. I wasn't making a case against him. I was just saying it anyway. Hockenson, though, that's an easy case to make. People love the targets and they love the catches. So why aren't we comfortable with him in round 4?
Because the downside is 10 to 11 PPR points per game, which is lower than Andrews' downside, I would add. And I think it's just safer to wait a little bit on Andrews. I've got him as a late round 5 pick, or not Andrews. I'm sorry, Hockenson as a late round 5 pick, because he's probably going to lose out on a little bit of targets to Addison. Addison should take at minimum 7 targets per game. Jefferson's going to take a ton, but he's still going to be good in PPR. He's still going to get good volume. I don't know where Heath has him at. I think he can get over 80 catches this year. I think he can get well over 100 targets this year. I'm fine if you want to take him as the 3rd tight end off the board. I wouldn't do it. I'd rather have Pitts as of now, but I just think it's a little too soon to take him where his ADP is.
How about Pitts then? Oh, actually, Kittle was around 5-6 turn. We think that's too early for him to be the 4th pick.
Yeah, you're drafting him based on past performance and not on current situation.
Kyle Pitts in round 6 is tight end 5. Kyle Pitts, Darren Waller, and Dallas Goedert are all going in round 6 or maybe early 7, according to ADP. Pitts, Waller, Goedert, and Jamie, how do you rank that?
Waller, Pitts, Goedert.
Jamie, I think you have to go. I know the studio is needed for, I believe, Morning Combat, a different podcast. So if you have to hop off at any time,
I'll just wait till they kick me out.
All right, you let me know. Heath, how do you rank those 3? Pitts, Waller, Goedert, and ADP?
It's really disappointed. I thought we were going to get Jamie ranking them, giving us analysis, and then saying got to go by. Pitts, Goddard, Waller.
Oh, I thought you said it's, but you said
Pitts, Goddard, Waller.
Dave?
Pitts, Waller, Goedert.
All right, so Pitts is so interesting for obvious reasons. He was pretty lousy last year. What do you expect, Dave? You had him as your breakout. What do you expect this year? Why are you optimistic?
I think he'll be better. There was a lot of good that he did last year. It just didn't translate into fantasy points. He ranked top 10 among tight ends in targets per game, targets per route run, which was huge, 28%. That was actually 22nd among all wide receivers and tight ends. He had 16 uncatchable targets out of 30 11 plus air yard throws. So more than half of the throws that he had that just went 11 plus yards downfield were off target, and they were all from Marcus Mariota, none from Desmond Ridder. You have to hope that Ridder takes a step forward in terms of accuracy. That's one of the things that you have to buy into if you draft Pitts. If you don't think Ridder can do it, and I'm not saying that Ridder has to become Aaron Rodgers overnight, he just has to take a step forward. If he does that, it's been proven that Kyle Pitts can get schemed open. He seems to be over the MCL injury that he had last year. He's been practicing a bunch. It's a fairly good schedule for the Falcons on top of that. And I think he could lead the Falcons in targets over the course of the season.
Anybody think Pitts is just going to stink this year? Not get enough volume?
So the only thing I keep going back to is I spoke to Arthur Smith for the story I did on Bijan Robinson. And, I asked him about Drake London. I asked him about Kyle Pitts. And the thing that he said about Kyle Pitts in terms of his numbers, we had Matt Ryan his rookie year, and we didn't have Matt Ryan last year. And I think that was just reading between the lines. We had a veteran that we trusted, let him throw. And we had some not trustworthy quarterbacks last year. Now, if you buy into Desmond Ridder and he buys into Desmond Ridder, then Desmond Ridder is going to have an opportunity to elevate these guys better than Marcus Mariota did, clearly, because as Dave alluded to, it was very frustrating. There's so much talent on the field for the Falcons, except the guy under center. And so if the guy under center can get it, we know that Bijan's going to get his touches because they ran the ball 559 times last year, led the NFL. Is the passing game in this offense able to support these two guys? Now, Arthur Smith was at the helm of a Titans offense that had a 2,000-yard rusher and still very good production from its receivers. And, I'm going to put Pitts in the receiving category here of Corey Davis and A.J. Brown. It was Brown's rookie season. And Davis is, I think, third year, fourth year at that point. So hopefully Ridder can do enough to support these guys. I think the thing that you're drafting Kyle Pitts on is you're drafting him based on what you saw his rookie campaign, the hope that he's going to find the end zone more, and he did a little bit better last year. But can all of these guys coexist in this offense in terms of pass catchers? Can they all coexist, meaning Pitts, London, and Robinson, in a low-volume situation with a relatively inexperienced, maybe terrible quarterback? And so it's all a lot of hope. And if that's the place you want to be, and I think, Adam, you brought this up in terms of why take X, Y, and Z tight end when you can just take somebody later. Well, I think this is that argument pushed up a little bit. Why take Kittle, Goddard, Waller, and not take the chance on the guy who could be the best, maybe, of the position besides Travis Kelce? So that's I think,
if you're not reaching for him.
That's what you're telling yourself if you're drafting Kyle Pitts. You're telling yourself that this is going to be the year that he does what the number 4 overall pick in the NFL draft from 2020 is supposed to do, and why he was the second rookie ever to get 1,000 yards of the position and becomes that breakout player. So if you don't mind taking a big swing, this is the guy you take the swing on, as opposed to maybe even Hockenson also. Hockenson, Waller, Goddard, Kittle. I think this is the one that you try and hit that home run with.
I will say, speaking of hope, the Falcons tweeted 43 minutes ago, "Oh, hi, Matt Ryan." He is at practice
Yeah.
today. He's not under contract, I don't think, with anybody.
He is
he
with
is.
us.
CBS.
Yeah, he's a
In
CBS
teams.
analyst now.
We've seen that happen before, haven't we?
Yeah.
We have, yes. I also think, look, you bring this up, Adam, about Anthony Richardson and the potential of Gardner Minshew playing. If Taylor Heineke plays, that might be better for the pass catchers there.
Yeah.
At some point, and I wouldn't rule that out. And this is something, Heath, I don't know how much you factor this in dynasty wise. For London, for Pitts, and for Bijan, they clearly have the potential to be dominant at their respective positions. But I think for this year, especially the way the division shakes out, they're going to be good enough where they price themselves out of a top-tier quarterback in the draft, most likely, because their defense is improved, the skill positions, mostly because the running game is going to be better, and they're probably going to challenge to be in the division mix, whether they are better than most likely the Saints. But if they are contending, they're taking themselves out of probably top 10 overall pick again.
I think it's a similar argument for or with McLaurin and Dotson, and with London and Pitts. You're hoping for one of two things if you have those guys, that either Sam Howell or Desmond Ritter's good, not great, just not terrible,
Correct,
or that they're just awful.
Yep.
I love Pitts at his ADP, which is 68th, but I never see him make it in our leagues to 68th.
Did he just freeze on that? Because he looks great.
Oh yeah, he did freeze. He's back. But
it was like the perfect pose.
Pitts at 68 is great. It's a round 6 pick. A round 5 pick, it's a big difference. I mean, there's some terrific players going in round 5 that you might have to pass up to take Pitts. If I can get him in the 6th round, then I'd obviously feel a lot more
I've only drafted him once so far, I'd say, of the, what have we done? Maybe 20 drafts, together in other leagues. The only draft I've taken him in so far was the Fishbowl, because you're trying to win a very big tournament, and he's the type of guy that will help you win a very big tournament if he wins. You don't get any points for just making the playoffs. You just he's the type of guy that if you're in the first or last, he's the type of tight end you take.
Who are you targeting first, Pitts or Drake London? For
Pitts.
me, it's Pitts.
Yeah,
Pitts for you too, Jamie. Heath?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's similar to the 49ers conversation. What he does at his position comparatively to what London does at his position, if one is going to be better than the other, you want it to be the tight end.
Heath?
I've got London just a little bit higher.
Adam?
But I have London projected for more targets this year and being better than Pitts.
Yeah, I think Chris made a great point. At ADP, why would you take London in round 4 when you can get Pitts 20 picks later? If you want a piece of the Falcons passing game, take Pitts later than London. And I just want to read this quote because Jamie might have to hop off here. This is from Zed. I think Adam's league sold out first last night. Not sure what that means. LOL.
I know exactly what
I think you might be right. Jamie thinks it was his, but I think it was.
No. I was hoping it was going to be mine.
No, I think you said check the tape. So I'm pretty sure it was mine.
Why do you think your league sold out first, Adam?
I have a theory.
I looked. Oh, why do I think it happened? Or are you saying like it happened? Why did it happen? Or
I don't know what you're asking me because
let's talk about tight ends.
I think just like Jamie said about the Scott Fishbowl, like if you're trying to win the league, and you should choose the path of least resistance.
Exactly.
All right, Dallas Goedert. Real quick on Goedert here. We're gonna talk about a lot more players. We're running out of time. Dallas Goedert, round 6-7 pick. He's obviously in that mix. Does he have big upside without an injury to Smith or Brown?
I'll say no. Just based
big
on
upside to what? Challenge to be a top 3 guy or challenge to be a top 5 guy?
3.
Like where's your?
He obviously could be a top 5 guy. I mean, that's evident.
Right, yeah.
5th.
He was last year.
Yeah. So could he be a top 3 guy? Could he have a 13 or more PPR point per game type of season?
Yes.
No.
Without an injury to those 2 guys.
He was 11.8 last year. Why couldn't he be 10% better? With 3 touchdowns on the whole year.
This is the range that he's lived in, I think, throughout his career.
The thing that we saw in the Super Bowl is what you're hoping for Dallas Goedert. We didn't see the Eagles in a lot of really competitive games. They were bludgeoning people, and he was a part of that. So when Jalen Hurts was forced to throw, they couldn't rely on their run game. They were in a back and forth game, where they had to be a little bit more aggressive throwing the ball. And that might be the case this year because of what the run game could look like. Yeah, I think Goedert could take a step forward. But to me, I view Goedert and Kittle very similarly. I think they're in crowded offenses that are going to have some limitations on them personally, but you still love to have them on your fantasy team at the right cost. So, that's why I think Waller has a higher ceiling because of what his role is for the Giants. So I would take Waller over both those guys. But if I get Goedert as the fallback in that tier, or even Kittle as the fallback in that tier, we just don't see it ADP. I'm perfectly fine with that. But it's just a matter of going into it. You can't expect him to be that guy. You have to hope, like you said. You have to hope, like you said, Adam. Either A, an injury, or B, they're just so much more. There's a lot more volume coming his way because they're throwing the ball more.
Okay, so that brings us to Evan Ingram, who's in round 8, and then Pat Freiermuth, David Njoku, Dalton Schultz. So these guys are veterans. Freiermuth going into his 3rd year. The other guys a little bit deeper into their careers. Ingram, Freiermuth, Njoku, Schultz. And the philosophy here, Dave, is what? If you didn't get one of those first 7, grab one and then grab an upside guy later. We sort of established that. That's not a bad way to go.
You don't have to grab a second tight end. Wouldn't be a bad idea if you did. But I think in the case of all these guys, except maybe, even Njoku, you could roll into the season with them as your starter, give them a few weeks. If they suck, then you go to your waiver wire and someone will be there that you can move in with them.
All right. And that's 11 tight ends.
But that's where the late tight ends start for me in the great or late conversation. This is at 100th overall in the draft.
Ingram?
Yep.
Probably not.
What's his ADP?
Round 8.
Yeah, well, that's too soon.
Okay. So Ingram, Freiermuth, and Njoku, Schultz, you've got a level of provenness there. A lot of the guys after that, you don't. So Okonkwo, Dulcich.
We finally got to Okonkwo.
Yeah. I'm surprised he's still tight end 11 in ADP, tight end 12. Dulcich, Higbee, Kincaid, Kmet, Jawan Johnson, Gerald Everett, Sam Laporta. It's a mix, Heath, of young guys that we're hoping take the next step. I think it's kind of mostly that. And then there's Higbee and Everett in there as well. How do you see that whole group? Basically, we're more or less done with the top 12.
Yeah, I think Higbee. I mean, Higbee's my favorite, and we talk about if a guy's going to have a weird season and finish top 5 when he shouldn't, it's probably a guy who finishes second on his team in targets. And Higbee is, I think, the most likely guy out of this group to be second on his own team in targets. I need to move Dulcich up a little bit. I had some Sean Payton anxiety with the way he was talking about the tight ends and seemingly having no idea who their best tight end was. It seems like Dulcich is moving into that range, so he would probably be next for me. I don't actually believe Okonkwo is going to be a thing now that DeAndre Hopkins and Treylon Burks are both ahead of him.
Yeah.
What should we expect from Kincaid and Laporta? And any other rookies?
Amazing performances. I mean, look, rookie tight ends, we know they struggle. And no matter the hype, as good as Kyle Pitts was as a rookie, he scored 1 touchdown, and so depending on the format that you play in, that was pretty frustrating for a lot of people, so 1,000 yards and you saw the potential. Is Kincaid going to be a red zone threat? That's, I think, a big question, that they seemingly like him in that role. Is Laporta going to take advantage of the 6-game absence that we have without Jameson Williams to maybe get some more targets? Those are things that you're hoping for. But again, I think you just have to be realistic, which is why the ADP is reflective of that. And I think our rankings are reflective of that. You just have to understand that there's going to be some flaws. There's going to be some growing pains. The difference is, I think, is what we may see from this class. And, Heath, you could probably, attest to this more in terms of where you're projecting these guys for the future. But and we talked about this, I think, a little bit yesterday with the quarterbacks, how teams are defending these great passing attacks. And, I think you could say Josh Allen is a great passing offense. The Bills are a great passing offense, and maybe Ben Johnson's offense for the Lions. But that's why the focus is on taking players like this, is the moving away from the traditional tight end, the more, slot receiver type of guys, and how much are they going to change the way offenses are run. And so you have a amazing class of these guys, and you're hearing great things from Musgrave in Green Bay. We'll see if Mayer can have some plays for the Raiders. But I think these two guys in particular, for Kincaid and for Laporta, they're great second tight ends if you're inclined to take two.
I think that's the key is, and I poo-poo the rookie tight end thing, and I've moved Kincaid up a little bit, but you should not expect for Kincaid and Laporta. You should hope there's upside there. It's potential, but you should not have there's no reason to have reasonable expectations of production from these guys this year.
They are getting opportunities in good offenses, good to great offenses. We can't call the Lions offense great yet. And that's what you're hoping for. And you're just taking a chance on them to start your fantasy season.
Do you think Kincaid sees more targets than Gabe Davis this year?
I think there's a chance. Yes.
I don't really.
That's the I love Kincaid, but I have a hard time seeing him being top 2 on his team in targets. But listen, that's a stat for top 5 tight ends. You want a guy who's going to finish 6, 7. They don't have to be top 2 on their team in targets. Maybe they won't have that big of an impact, but seeing Kincaid finish as like tight end 8 wouldn't really shock me. Which is just not that good of a season. It's just not. I mean, Dawson Knox.
That's a good return on a very late round pick.
Yeah, it is. Dawson Knox has been actually kind of like in that top 12 range.
And I don't think he's totally going away. He's great.
He's not.
No.
Yeah, he's not.
All right.
That's an offense with a ton of options now.
Thank you, guys. Good show. Big thank you to everyone who's in the FFT Open, raising $22,000 for St. Jude in a matter of hours. That was awesome. Much more to come. Actually, go to tinyurl.com/FFT donate, and you can bid on other things like calls with Dave, Jamie, Heath, me, Chris, etc. Appearances on podcasts and things like that. If we learn one thing today, it is definitively that Mark Andrews has only had one good season. And we will be back with a mailbag, which we're recording later this afternoon, which will air tomorrow. Thanks so much. Have a great weekend, everybody. This is Fantasy Football Today.